Yeah. Good afternoon. We're going to start our meeting. So I'm going to call to order the January 12th Housing Committee meeting at 1:05 p.m. Welcome. So we need to have an approval of the agenda. So recommendation that the Housing Committee meeting agenda for January the 12th, 2022 be approved as circulated. Do I have a mover? Siobhan, seconder, Pia, all in favor? Carried. Approval of minutes. Recommendation that the minutes of the Housing Committee meeting held on November the 3rd, 2022 be adopted. Do I have a mover? Malcolm, seconder, Tia, can't see both ways. No, that's good. That's good.
We're all spread out pretty good.
Yes. Okay. All in favor? Carried. So we have new business. We have the appointment of a new committee member, Tia Lemieux. And I'm not sure that, I'm sure that everybody knows her, but Tia, do you want to just welcome to the committee? We're really glad to have you. You're going to be a very good asset to this committee. If you just want to say hello.
Hello, I'm Tia Cicerella Lemieux, actually. I've lived in Sicamous for over 30 years.
Wow.
Yeah, I moved up here with my husband, who was marine mechanic for waterways and then independent. And then I also was involved in the houseboating industry for many years, software company for 12 years as in charge of development of that company. And then started my own business, which was a vacation rental management company, and had that for 15 years, and a print shop. So been involved in the Chamber of Commerce. I was same as what Sheila did for many years, and different committees, and been involved in the curling club. So big part of the community.
That's good. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for being willing to be on the committee.
Yeah, I'm excited about being involved. Yes.
Good. Okay. Moving on then, we will get right into the housing strategy. So Sarah, I'm going to suggest you take the lead on this.
Okay. So here's our flow chart, our progress that you're familiar with. Here we are. We're at the bottom of our flow chart, everybody. Slap yourselves on the back. Hey. So we're at review and recommendation. So we made the changes that we discussed last time. We brought the initial draft. We've got our updated census data. And I've passed around the document to everybody. It now includes that census data. It wasn't on the agenda originally. Okay. It's attached to it now, and I've given you copies of it. Yeah. Comments. What do you think? Is this ready to move forward to council with a recommendation from the committee, or do some more?
Okay, go ahead. This is more of a discussion format today. Still raise your hand.
Okay.
Just so that we're not all jumping in at once. Go ahead, Malcolm.
Were you gonna walk through the document, Sarah?
I can, if you would like to.
Oh, I don't know. I wasn't asking you to, I was just
Well,
going to.
I've,
I don't know, would that help Tia?
Yeah, I've been through it.
I think so too.
I'd like to walk through it too. Like honestly,
Yeah.
I've had it for a few days. But I think maybe if Tia has questions, and I always have questions anyways, it's always changing. So I think if we go through it, you know, it's a, if it's going to council, this is it. So we got to make sure this is what we want to present.
okay. Okay, I would agree with that. That's because I want to be up to speed too.
Okay, so like inside our cover page, we've got our acknowledgements, everybody that participated or, you know, I did support. while we were doing consultation, et cetera. Contents in here. I don't think that of the document has changed too much from last time. What I did add is an appendix C resources. So I'll go through and add that. It's not done yet. I'm putting in web links so that people can easily go to the resource.
Okay.
Going through and digging those out. So we've got our introduction, which kind of talks about our background. So this document comes directly out of our housing needs assessment that was completed for 2022. And this strategy attempts to address the gaps and needs that were identified. And then this talks about the process, like how the committee has gone about putting this document together. So our next page, page 6, is some information from our housing strategy, some basic information that helps kind of frame the document. So it's a summary of housing need from that 2022 housing needs assessment. So we've got a list of who are our priority groups for Sicamous, where are our gaps in housing, and then we've got an update of our housing targets. So from 2021 to 2022. So we looked at, you know, how many units we need built this year and how many have actually been built. It's pretty low. Deficit 160. And then we've got a brief excerpt in there on the meaning of attainability in terms of what that means, and a comparison of a few of our kind of top groups that came up a lot in consultation in terms of what those different groups can afford. So the seasonal workers, seniors, construction workers, just kind of putting that into perspective. Like, this is what amount of their earnings they can afford to put into housing. It puts it into perspective. So our next page is our recap on our engagement. So we had 256 survey responses, which is excellent. It's more even than what we had for the housing needs assessment, and it's more than what we've had on any of our other surveys, like for our Parks and Trails master plan, for example, which was going on at the same time. So it's definitely something people are very concerned about and passionate about. So we had 4 sessions that were live, where the public could come and meet with us and talk with us and share their stories, and 8 meetings with the housing committee. Of course, that's gone up to like 9 as of today if we wanted. And we've also had 3 meetings with rights holders, being Splatching. And so then we've got kind of a list of outcomes that came from that consultation. So this is updated from the last version, and it's been tightened up and speaks more to like specific things. So if you want me to read that, I can.
Yes, I think actually,
Yeah.
you did just read that out loud if you would.
Okay.
Yeah.
So outcomes. So of the engagement process, there's a need for coordination, resources, and leadership to provide a centralized information hub to connect landlords and tenants, to provide and manage housing of alternative tenure types, i.e. rental, co-op, rent to own, and affordable in perpetuity. There's also a need for coordination, resources, and leadership to promote existing opportunities and incentives to home buyers. There's a desire for clear language around the needs of seniors. There's strong support for infill housing in our low density neighborhoods. There is confirmation that mixed use and high density residential development is considered to be compatible with all our commercial areas, not just our town center, but other commercial areas as well. There is a need to protect existing housing stock from redevelopment and the loss of family housing to the growth of the short-term rental industry. So this is referring to the results of the survey and conversation. So the survey results are attached as the first appendix.
Okay, do you have any comments on that?
No,
Does it, seeing it for the first time, I just kind of.
I did read through
Okay,
this,
great.
but yeah, I didn't understand at first what infill housing was, but that's just basically.
It's kind of a range of different things. So like a really easy one is secondary dwellings, right? Having cottages or coach houses.
Okay,
That's one way.
okay, so basically filling it or area that there's already a dwelling there, but you can add a second.
Exactly.
Okay, all right.
But it also contemplates allowing subdivisions, so people can subdivide off a side yard
Okay,
right? Or work with a neighbor to subdivide off 2 side yards and create a lot.
so does our zoning include, or the ability to do
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, our new zoning will allow for that.
Okay.
For sure.
It's in the new bylaw 1,000.
Okay, all right.
It does tweak so.
Yeah.
There's some things that almost as part of this. So one of the things, there's a lot of support. People were very interested in having 2 accessory dwellings, for example. So we would need to do like a tweak to that existing zone to add that in there and a minor tweak to the OCP. But I don't want to digress too much.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good.
The last bullet there,
Yeah,
protect existing housing stock from redevelopment and loss of family housing to the growth of short-term rentals. Well, bylaw 1,000
Looked at.
addresses that with the short-term rentals,
it does partially, yes. for-
partially, yeah.
Partially, yeah. So protecting housing stock, it's not just that. There's other tools we can bring to bear other than just getting a handle on how many short-term rentals there are, right? So we'll get there,
Okay.
talk about it more. Okay, so the next page, page 8. We tried to put this together so that we had 2 pages that were really clear that could be pulled out of this document and like you could put it on a wall or hand it out, right? So here's our vision statement. I did rewrite it to really make it ours, so we're not plagiarizing.
Golden.
I know.
I know.
Have a look at it. Please let me know if you're happy. So our vision for Sycamoose and neighboring communities is to ensure residents have access to attainable housing that supports wellness, comes in a variety of housing types and tenure options, and is appropriate for people of all ages, abilities, and incomes. And it's phrased that way because of what our gaps are. We have all the gaps, right, Malcolm?
Yeah, we lucky we have all the gaps.
I like it. I like the wording is very nice.
Okay, and it continues on because there's a second sentence, which is attainable housing is a prerequisite for a community to be socially and economically sustainable, which is of importance to Sycamoose economic sustainability. And we will work together towards this vision. All right, and then our goals, I tweaked them a little bit to make them a little clearer. There are a few comments that 2 of them, the way they were written, people thought it said the same thing. So I tweaked it.
Okay.
Please let me know if that's good. So goal number 1, provide healthy, safe, and attainable housing. Goal 2, provide diverse housing types that can accommodate changes in ages and abilities over time. And 3, support a variety of tenure options that meet the needs of seniors, young adults, low-income households, and families. Do they sound different? I hope.
Well,
They
in
do because
number 3,
So one is, number 2 is talking about types of housing unit, duplex, apartments. What is that? Hey, welcome. And tenure is talking about different forms of ownership or rental. So and this is speaking to having a co-op, speaking to affordable and in perpetuity, rent to own, these other ways, as well as rental. Rental is another form of tenure.
so in these 3 different definitions, where's people with disabilities captured?
So this is being captured in where we're talking about the needs of everyone, right? So we can tweak it, so seniors, the needs of seniors is similar to the needs of people with different, that have
Changes in ages
access,
and abilities?
right? Yeah, so I think that, but I can change it, I can add.
I think
I think number covers it. Yeah.
okay.
I'm just gonna.
Changes in ages and abilities, or ages and maybe ability.
I think ability covers everybody. So if it's a mental ability or a health
Right.
issue or, you know, mobility.
Ability
Yeah.
covers mobility.
Yes.
It does, yeah.
Okay, I was just curious.
Yes, for that too, would there be a proximity to, like for seniors or,
Oh, proximity to amenities.
yes,
That's a big deal for BC Housing that they base their grants around proximity to services and amenities.
But in general, it's not something that you can provide because if they're building it you know, it's a small town, so I think within the community, it's,
Provide healthy, safe.
Mel's gonna pick him up in his car.
Because then transportation comes into play. So that's why I'm just, yeah.
Yeah, it's a higher level of planning that will come as part of the implementation. So there will be more work done through our update of our official community plan.
Mhm.
So it does speak to implementation and the kinds of things we need to build in there. And that will start looking at land use, kind of where those things need to be.
Yeah.
Do we have somewhere that tells us what obtainable housing means?
Yeah, so that's when you come here. So
Or am I going
page
forward or backwards?
6, the meaning of attainability. And then we've got the under page table, we talk about BC housing. What they
Down
talk
here.
about is attainable, yeah. So this snapshot, these household stories are basically showing you what attainable means for people of different incomes. It means it's 30% or less of their income is housing.
yes, serviceability.
And is that, when we look at what BC's doing right now, most people are paying about 55%. So is that something we can actually, so we can say obtainable, but is it actually something? So right now, rental in Sycamore for a 3-bedroom house is between $2,000 and $3,000. It's not, like, it doesn't fit in this, so should we
It's
be?
because it's not attainable. So what we're talking about is getting people attainable housing. And that's what our strategy is about, is trying to bring in housing.
Right, but I mean, I worry that we can reach that goal.
Well, that's why we want to do a community land trust with a co-op, right?
Yes.
That's why we're passionate about that. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so if we move on from our goals, we go to our strategies. So we have 6 strategies, and beneath each of those strategies, we've got sub-strategies that contribute to that. And all these strategies' intent is to meet the goals, right? So strategy 1 is create the conditions to support housing development and remove barriers. This strategy is directly correlated to the district of Sycamore and basically reviewing all our bylaws and policies and making sure that we kind of clear the way and make it easier to make this happen. So we've got things in there like enable diverse housing types, and we've already tried to do that first blush with our zoning bylaw, but we can come back in and tweak it some more. Do whatever we can to encourage rental and attainable housing. Review and update bylaws and policies. And then you'll see, so then from the strategies, the document goes on, there's a section for each of these strategies that there's a whole paragraph explaining what each of these sub-strategies mean, right? And then there's a table with specific action that can be taken.
Oh, I see. So this is the sort of table of contents for the rest of the document.
Yeah,
And then it's broke down strategy 1 and then through 6.
okay.
It's nicely laid out.
Yeah. So, and we do have on our next page here what our short-term actions are. So I know the committee talked a lot about low-hanging fruit and what we can do right away. So these are all things that can happen within like immediately to a year to 2 years. So some of these things is already kind of work in progress that we just wanted to speak to in the strategy. Like, yes, the housing committee wants to support what's already going on, right? So things like work with partners to construct a mixed use, mixed tenure building on Main Street. It's already a project that council's working on. And then what we were talking about earlier, work with the hotel industry to implement MRDT for a specific housing project. But that's something we would look at in, say, 2 years. So we could start looking at it later in the year, like in terms of feeling out support for that. It's not something we can implement without the hotel industry and short-term rental industry from participating in that. So master transportation plan, that's something that's coming up in the next year or two. It's something that we've already got some funding for, and we're working with MOTI on funding as well. So the idea behind that is looking at potentially doing road diets and in order to create additional parcels and perhaps create spaces where on-street parking, like dedicated on-street parking for some higher density. Implement property tax exemptions for infill housing. So we have what's called a revitalization tax bylaw, where you can designate specific types of development where they would kind of get a tax break. And it might be for the first 5 years, and it might be lowest within the first 5 years, and it slowly comes up to normal over, say, 10 years, depending on what it is. So there's a bunch of different ways that things we can do. Another is updating the R1 zone to allow for 2 secondary dwelling units. Consider implementation of an infill zone, which would be broader than just this 2 secondary dwelling unit thing. This infill zone would speak to things like triplexes and row housing, not just single family homes with accessory dwellings. So this is one for council, consider delegating authority to staff for the approval of medium density developments of residential, just to try to make that process happen faster. Doesn't have to go to council to be approved. Develop and adopt a policy for accessible design in consideration of our OCP policy 2.4. So this is something for council. Council would need to adopt this policy, but staff would support development of that policy for accessible design. And this is where we start speaking to dwellings that are visitable, dwellings that are able to accommodate someone who has some mobility issues, right? So right, roll in entry, roll in shower, yeah. So what that policy then could speak to, like tease it out a little, would be like, okay, somebody wants to build a triplex, at least one of those units needs to be accessible. So perhaps it's the ground floor unit, right? To start building up our inventory of units that are able to accommodate people that can age in place or just have that need. They need that for their mobility. Parks and Trails Master Plans is another immediate one. So this is Steffi's project, and she's aware of what we've been working on, but building considerations for green infrastructure to help offset increased density. So as we increase density in our neighborhoods, there'll be a loss of private open space. So it was a concern of the committee to make sure there was a strategy to ensure that there was good quality public space. Review and update enforcement tools to support protection of housing stock. Implement regulation and monitoring of the short-term rental industry. So that's something that's already happening, that last one.
I have, yes, one comment on the first strategy. Should we change the name of the company in there that it's with the DOS plus, should it be Attainable Housing Development Corp? Because that's changed. So I feel that
I haven't put a name. I haven't named a company.
was Habitat for Humanity.
Right. Oh, I see where you're saying.
Isn't.
Right. I thought I missed it. Yes. Thank you.
Okay. We just need to change that to either open-ended because we don't.
Or just for, say, not-for-profit.
Yes.
Yeah. Nonprofit housing provider.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I wasn't looking at that key contributors column. I was looking at the action column. So it's like, oh, I took it out. It's not there.
So there's one thing that people, when they're trying to get in, like they hear rumors that we're going to build some new housing, and they say, okay, we'd like to get on that list. You know, even if it's a year or maybe, hopefully not 2 years, but they want to get on that list. Well, they have to go to Salmon Arm to register for housing in Sycamus. So is that addressed in here that we can?
One of the short-term actions, it's in some of the longer-term actions.
What wouldn't that be?
You need to find a partner.
Yeah, it's just a non-for-profit society. There's 2 housing societies in town.
And are you aware of a housing committee that's willing to like make some kind of official commitment to it?
Have we reached out to them?
We have, I'll just speak because I'm on the board for EVS CHS. Is that we have talked about it and we've looked into it deeper because we do have, you must be a provider of rent geared income housing in your community to actually become part of the registry. That is something that society could do. And as you look deeper into it, it's with BC Housing, it's partnered with BC Housing. You lose a little bit of control within your own community doing that. And I know as a small community, that's something that you really have to look long and hard at it. If you're going to review it as council, to whether or not the community goes down that road, because BC Housing then has some say as far as what we've researched. So there's outside control of who comes to Sicamous for that housing when they need it. It's not necessarily from within our community. So it could be somebody from that's living elsewhere.
It's like our
needs a spot.
Our seniors that sometimes come in from.
Right.
Or wherever to take a.
Correct. And I think it, as a community and as the senior housing board, this is just my personal opinion, is that I think the mandate has been to really look after the seniors and the senior community from within and those that are living here, as well as and families, but it impacts families too. So right now, if you put your name on the housing list that's in Salmon Arm, you wouldn't necessarily get to, you'd go to wherever, you may not even get in Salmon Arm. They're going to send you to wherever there is a spot open in a list within another community in the region maybe. So,
But it's like specific to people who need rent geared to income.
right, it's specific that you have to have a housing society or a provider that actually has that as part of their portfolio currently. So EVS CHS has that option. But I don't know, as you know, it might be better as a general society. So it's just, I think I think it's a longer conversation and discussion.
Yeah, it's just,
Yeah,
it's just the optics. We're doing all this stuff for
Yeah.
affordable housing, but at the end of the day, they still gotta go to Salmon Arm to try to find a house here in Sicamous.
yeah. So when it is the affordable housing part of that program, of course, then it does involve BC Housing, which is what can you have an independent list as a
Which is what.
co-op?
Which is what I'm wondering.
Yes,
And I mean, this project that Malcolm's talking about, that we heard about, like,
right.
it's not in a place where we could even consider taking names, I don't think, because we don't really know what our mix is yet.
People are just panicking. I think that
Yeah.
we have a lot of people that are aging in their homes that need that next level. And they're actually at the point where they need to be out of their homes.
Do they need supportive housing? Or
No, they don't need supporting, they need a smaller place and they don't have anywhere to go.
New independent living,
Yeah.
Okay.
So I mean,
downsizing.
yeah, where they need to downsize, but they can't afford to buy back into the community per se.
Okay.
And they want to just, like, what they want is kind of like a cute little apartment style
Like
living and
An infill on their own property.
an infill on their own property.
Yes.
Might end up that way.
But I mean, you look at someone like Joan Willie or Mrs. Thompson, who's ended up in Salmon Arm, who are huge advocates in our town and volunteer a ton of hours. And they've both ended up in Salmon Arm and having to buy apartments there because they had to leave their homes. But there's not that in between to going to the senior center.
So they could they, yes, build something on their own property and rent out their home?
Yes, that's
what we're trying.
Now they can.
Yeah.
Right.
now they can. It's in,
They couldn't when they left.
yeah.
A lot of seniors have mortgage-free homes.
It's something we do right away that people
Something that you
can
do.
and can do.
Yeah.
So when we start talking about bigger projects, well, that's a multi-year thing that needs funding, you know what I mean? Like building building,
Yes, exactly.
right? So low hanging fruit, if we open up the.
But how does that person afford to build that on their property so they can
Yes.
fit into it is the question.
Yes.
Well, most,
Reverse mortgage.
a lot of seniors are mortgage-free,
Yeah, yeah.
And so they just can pull some equity out of their house and build another house and then move into that house and have the big house pay for the.
And there are kids that moved away that want to come back and live in their house.
Yeah.
And there's other options. Right? So part of what the committee really wants to see is a communication of different ways people can do this. So we'll get in place our own tools. B, we can also kind of put out there these other ways people can make this happen. So I saw a really interesting company out of Vancouver called Hay City, and they like to do this project where they do micro ops. So they partner with a property owner with a home who wants a smaller unit to redevelop the property. And what the owner gets out of it is, because the owner can't afford to develop some big thing.
Yeah.
Right? They get their own unit, and then the rest of the units would be part of the co-op
Right.
sold. And the benefit is, so in exchange for whatever their property is worth, am I making sense? It goes into,
Yeah.
it's interesting, and there's some interesting breakdowns.
Because there is a lot of properties that are oversized lots and
They're huge,
Well,
the more.
the Tree Street, because they used to have septic on it, so they needed a bigger lot for septic. Now you got city services, so yeah, so a lot of the lots are like 0.23 of an acre and they have room for a secondary.
And we've captured that in this strategy. That's one of the strategies.
Okay, should we carry on?
Yeah.
I think we're gonna come upon all these things, like we're all
Okay.
passionate about these things, and yeah, we got it in there, guys, it's here, okay. So from our short-term actions are low-hanging fruit, which is, I want to highlight for you, because this could be, you know, in terms of making a recommendation to council, we could just say, endorse this whole strategy, but we could also point out, hey, there's short-term actions here, and we have an implementation plan, but we'll get to that on our next topic. Okay, but I just want to highlight that part of the strategy. So strategy 1, create the conditions to support housing development and remove barriers. So this kind of goes into some of those things that I was talking about in terms of, you know, policies, right? Next page on the back, there's a list of actions. So it talks about going in and doing the tax bylaw thing. Okay. Strategy 2, seek partnerships and facilitate collaboration. So this is, you know, looking at maintaining partnerships, seeking out new ones. Part of our consultation process, we try to identify partners and invite them, you know, potential partners, and kind of see where they were at in terms of maybe participating and helping to facilitate some of this stuff to happen. But I'll maybe just go through a few things we've got noted on here. So seek partnerships and facilitate collaboration. So kind of number 1 on here, utilization of district-owned land to try to get some projects off the ground. Probably smaller density, but it's something, because these are smaller parcels. So we already know we've got some land on Main Street that's already slated for project, 417, 425. There's also 809 Capel Street. It's a district-owned property that could be suitable to do some infill row housing with secondary dwellings. You might be able to get maybe 3 row house units there with some secondary dwellings. Be worth looking at. 414 Oak Avenue, maybe look at some kind of an infill triplex with a coach house that's designed in a way to kind of fit into that neighborhood. Most of those houses are 1 story right now, but the zoning allows for more. But yeah, of course, be sensitive to the area. And then looking at Holly Avenue, which is an unconstructed road right away. I guess historically MOTI was going to push 97A through there.
There, yeah.
Yeah, they're gonna follow the toe of the mountain sort of.
It doesn't seem like that's gonna carry on. So it would be interesting to look into acquiring that and maybe look at it as a candidate for a community land trust and some mixed development there, like a combination of row houses with some secondary dwellings, maybe some single family or triplexes that look like single family. It'd be interesting.
Oh,
Kind of, there's a big area there.
Always around the
Buddies.
Pine Oak, right under the mountain.
Oh, okay.
Cottonwood.
corner.
So if you're gonna walk up to Bayview, you go through the back, and then you know how you walk up the hill to
Okay,
hike up, that's
yep, okay.
So
that
Hi-
gravel lot we walk through.
Highway 97 was gonna shoot along the toe and then down Sherlock and hit Highway 1 sort of thing.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, we did a bit of a land inventory when we first started working and kind of
You know how wide that right of way is?
it's pretty wide, Malcolm. It's huge.
It's a big space.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's why I'm saying.
How wide is that even?
Like a mixed.
And that's close enough to town, so when we talked about going out to TNA, that was too far out. Because there was that property that was for sale at TNA at some point. And I don't think it is, but is it still within,
It's still kind of, it's
Community?
within,
and they're not crossing the highway?
I consider it to be part of the tree streets. It's not part of the original subdivision, but it's part of the tree streets.
Yeah.
And there's definitely, in terms of the way the internal roads are set up.
Yeah. Scooters could do it.
Yeah, I mean, I watch kids walk. to and from-
It's in the school. It's where the school, the elementary school is. It's the arena, the rec center, right? It would be the far east end of town.
Yeah, it's kind of further down at this
It's
end.
way at like at the bottom of Bayview.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
but like, no, if you walk up the back,
Closer, not
Come
come
to- yeah.
you walk up the back mountain.
Yeah,
So it's,
yes.
yeah.
Yeah, but it's definitely internal. I walk through there, like I live on Elder and that's like on my walking route. It's not
Yeah.
far for me. Like I go and I walk my dogs through there. So, yeah.
Just had-
That's owned by MOTI right now?
Which I'll come to you next.
And we'll talk about it more after.
Okay, all right.
yeah, we want it.
Okay.
Just based on these, what kind of numbers, like in units, are you talking for each? Do you have a number or?
Capel, 3 principal dwelling units. So it would be under one tenure. So maybe one of them is a rental unit, one, and then a couple might be affordable in perpetuity. And how we would secure that is through a community land trust. For example, if there isn't a co-op to manage it, it's kind of a new model that's sort of like a hybrid of a co-op that doesn't directly involve co-op. So 3
Mhm,
plus 3 accessory dwellings. So that's 6.
okay,
And this is in general, I mean.
Yep, yep.
let's Look at it in terms of servicing, et cetera, right? On Oak, 4,
Mhm.
right? And then Holly, a lot more than that. And I would really need to look at it in terms of, there is a bit of a slope there. It's at the foot of a slope. But there's a fair bit of land there.
so maybe
Oh,
could be a
12.
dozen, yeah, okay.
Yeah, it could be.
And then what about Main Street? Then what's the plan for how many in there?
Remember?
Main Street, the agreement we had with Habitat for Humanity, which doesn't exist anymore. Bottom floor commercial, there's gonna be 54 units there of housing,
Okay,
a mixed use housing.
I'm just asking just because of the goal that of
Mhm.
housings that we don't have or that we need, based on what is really attainable, at this point in time without.
These are ones,
Yeah.
projects that would be, right, so this would be in addition to opening up the ability of individual property owners to provide.
Exactly, yeah, yeah.
And
So you can see where your shortfall is after this, right?
there's possibly 36 units going on the back too of, you can speak this, but like between the back of 417 Main
Yeah.
and between the old folks home and
Go up
Holly.
on top of the 50.
be 36
Yes.
more in there.
Okay,
Yeah, with the current grant, and that has been
Yeah.
broken.
seniors, yeah. sure.
Yeah.
So 20 units for seniors and then 16 for young families.
Okay,
So with the current funding that senior housing has, it's 36 units and broke down 20 for seniors and 16 for young families. And out of that 16, I think 1 unit is supposed to be accessible.
mhm.
And that.
And then
the
50
Land is there and like the funding is fairly close to being in place, correct, Miller?
Well, the
Correct me if I'm-
funding's there, but it gets released in stages.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, let's continue on.
Okay, so another piece, so this was a recommendation from our consultant that did our housing needs assessment, and it was scale up the building sector. So we've got existing businesses in town that are active in the construction industry locally. Working with them to enable them to build more complex buildings. So right now they can build single family homes, any of these accessory dwellings, that's their jam. But supporting them and being able to, bid on contracts to build apartment buildings or row housing where like the code requirements are a little different. So you need some more knowledge,
Mhm.
right? So that's what that is. And that talks about maybe partnering with the Chamber of Commerce and DOS-DC to secure funding to give access to these companies and their staff to training through, say, like the North Okanagan College, that kind of thing. So here it is, Malcolm, support the establishment of a housing registry. And that really, it's like we need a partner to make that happen. And we've already talked about it, so I'll move on. So collaborate with right holders, stakeholders, and nonprofit organizations. So this is looking at, you know, any of these to try and stack our funding. So it's kind of what the district was already doing, working with the Eagle Valley Seniors Housing Society and partnering with Habitat for Humanity, which is a branch that's got a different name. But I mean, there's also potential to work with Splatsheen where they want to maybe provide combined, you know, address both communities' needs. So the next one is work to ensure housing respects and takes into account the expression of cultural identity and ways of life. So I personally have encountered this a few times, especially with immigrant families where, you know, our zoning regulations wouldn't let, say, a family from India have their spice kitchen. So traditionally they have 2 kitchens, but the way that we define a dwelling unit, it would be like a duplex, right? We don't do that in our new bylaw. So that's for example, but we can also be culturally sensitive to rights holders as well, who may have different ways of living, intergenerational living, for example. So we got some actions on here as well. They're mostly around, you know, continuing with our current partnerships, explore, I've got on here, explore partnering with the BC Community Land Trust or other land trust that's out there, or work with partners to determine if there is an appetite for the creation of a Sicamous-based community land trust. But we can also work with this particular one is all across BC, and a lot of local governments are already working with them. I shared this with Siobhan because she has somebody who's very interested in this. They also help communities set up their own co-op.
Okay.
Which is fantastic. Having that kind of knowledge and background to be able to get that to happen. So, I also have on here to work with the BC MPHA to provide information session about housing co-ops, their formation and management. So there's, you know, a potential role here to help provide an information session for those that are interested in starting a co-op in town.
That would be fabulous.
Yeah.
Yeah, BC and PHA, the BC Non-for-Profit Housing Association, they have a huge resources there to tap into.
Yeah, I agree. I know I talked to, we invited them to some of our engagement sessions and
Right.
yeah, she was very helpful, one of their staff. Okay, let's go on to the next one. So innovation, and this is where a lot of our infill ideas are. We kind of talked about that a little bit already. And the whole concept of infill is to utilize existing infrastructure that we already have. So, you know, a big thing we run into is a lot of our lands where official community plan or zoning supports these higher densities, there's no servicing there for it. So it's really hard for those projects to get off the ground, right? Especially right now with the way costs are, right? So if we look at our existing neighborhoods that already have servicing, and I did talk to Jeremy, who's our technologist, was about this stuff. Our servicing is adequate to support these extra 2 accessory dwellings and to some extent, maybe a few townhouse developments, depending on where they are. There's enough infrastructure there. So that's pretty cool. So that was number 1. There's a lot more under there if anybody wants to read it, but so support home ownership through the use of housing cooperatives and community land trusts and providing housing that's affordable in perpetuity. So talked about that a lot already. Implement a fast track permitting process for infill. So this one kind of speaks to a layering of different strategies that I kind of combined into one that I think we had teased out before. So in an effort to make this document as concise as kind of combined a few things. So this would speak to things like council delegating authority to a senior staff member to approve permits for infill. It also speaks to this library of pre-approved construction plans. They've already been stamped by the building inspector. They've already been reviewed for form and character. And so that it's just a matter of applying for a siting permit, basically.
That complements somebody who's trying to infill.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think that's a big push for like low hanging fruit is to focus on that and see what we can get out of our other projects for bigger buildings. Maybe our plans for other buildings become part of our catalog. Implement a grant program to incentivize infill through secondary dwelling units. So this was the other piece that I kind of pulled out separately. Look at a way of helping people to afford putting in something like that. So I can see that being really helpful to get something like that off the ground. So even if it's converting existing space, like say $1,000 would go a long way to converting, you know, a garage or an extra living room somebody has, converting it into a secondary dwelling unit.
So instead of the district losing the development cost charges, we have a pre-approved grant to pull those funds out of instead,
It would offset, yeah.
offset them, yeah. That's right.
Exactly, yeah, and I did talk about that in here, like what City of Vernon did with theirs is your grant will be equal to the amount of the development cost charges that would apply to that building. So that people aren't paying that, because it's like a big unexpected charge. We're talking about several $1,000s as part of your building permit, right? So you get your plans for free. You get a grant that covers the development cost charges, right? That's going to go a long way. And then we have our revitalization tax incentive where you're not getting taxed on that additional development on your property for the next 5 years.
No permit costs.
Yeah.
And the permit costs could come down potentially, we'll see. But certainly the timeline for issuance would be way faster.
Cheaper and faster.
I have a question about that, just to, because your bylaw that you just put into place for the short-term rentals, that if you have a carriage house as, you know, your secondary house for short-term rentals, for instance, right? You're able to do that. So if you live in your home, so say somebody goes and does this, you know, gets
There would be conditions on being able to
Right.
gain access to those incentives. There would be a condition, probably a housing agreement. Right, so that for the next 5 years, so we'll have access to all these incentives, but for the next 5 years, this must the long-term
right.
rental. And then after that,
And it's registered on title as a covenant.
yeah, that's how housing agreements work.
Okay.
On title, yeah, it's through a bylaw and registered on title, yeah. Yeah, so, and we would try to keep it short, because I mean, part of the idea of accessory dwelling units would be, and it always has been previously, but would continue to be, it's a way of supporting home ownership, right?
Yep.
It's a mortgage helper. So whether or not somebody's using it for a long-term tenant or as a short-term rental,
Mhm.
I know I personally, for my unit, I don't want a short-term rental. I prefer the comfort of
Right.
the person that I know.
I was just thinking of somebody, you know.
100%.
Yeah,
Looking for the loop.
funds, yeah,
To
exactly.
make tons of money.
Yeah.
Saying, there's ways of ensuring that it becomes part of our housing.
Conditions or whatever that are put in place, yeah.
Period of time, as everything else kind of catches up, hopefully. So we've got a list of actions here as well for this one. So the next one, strategy 4, embed wellness in housing. And this speaks directly to the district's wellness strategy. I'm going to Pam because I know Pam was very involved in it. So number 1, plan for and promote access to high quality communal and public outdoor space. Number 1. So as we're increasing density and losing some open space and greenery on our parcels, we start looking to make that part of the street potentially, but also maybe provide smaller neighborhood parklets, right? Dotted throughout the neighborhood. So that there's somewhere you can go and hang out with the kids and meet your neighbors and sit under the shade of a tree kind of thing. The next one, we implement the step code, which is already implemented, I believe, based on what my building inspector says, provincially. So there's no choice in that matter. It's happening. Implement the step code and consider an incentive program for energy efficiency targeting attainable dwelling units. So this would be, we'd need to do a little more research into this to figure out how to make that work. But the general idea is to make sure that those units are built in a way that the cost of running that home, so once somebody gets into it and they can afford, say, the rent or the mortgage on it, they need to be able to afford the cost of heating and cooling it as well. So part of how that also speaks to wellness is that, you know, families will often turn the heat off, which means they end up with mold, right? And now it's not a healthy home and the home starts to decline. So that's kind of where that help speaks to wellness. Accessible and adaptable housing standards, we've talked about that before, but getting those in place as well to support wellness. Intergenerational housing and aging in place. So make sure that we're able to support our seniors in aging in place through, so we've got our infill idea, right? And our accessible and adaptable housing standards, where we'll make sure that we capture a few units every time they're built that are accessible. But also speaking to projects, say a co-op or an apartment building, a micro-op, where it's an intentional community that's puts seniors and young people together intentionally on purpose. Because as we know, seniors need help shoveling snow. Well, let's put a young body there that can help with the general upkeep around the property, right? For example, but it's got all these other benefits as well. You know, it helps to deal with loneliness with seniors, or even, you know, single young people that live alone. There's more people around. Got a list of actions on the next page. Strategy 5, protecting existing. Review and update our enforcement tools. So this is something that's kind of been coming up as staff have been internally going over our bylaws for some other work that council has tasked staff with, that we need to kind of update our enforcement tools in terms of making it, so currently we use an MTI bylaw, which is a municipal ticketing information bylaw. It's not really the best way to do enforcement. So there's some conversations around establishing a bond system that requires cooperation with other municipalities like neighboring. And there is some interest there. And what the bond system does, it allows for higher fines, and it also, there's some other ways that it functions as well. Because the only other way really to do enforcement would be to take someone to court. It's a lengthy, costly process for the public. Anyway, looking at some better enforcement tools. So we have them if we need them. Protect our housing. Standards of maintenance bylaw. So this is something we don't currently have. We currently have a good neighbor bylaw, which speaks to the outside of your house, the outside of your property, and it being neat and tidy. A standards of maintenance bylaw speaks to buildings, and it's not talking about it being high fashion inside. It's about you know, the toilet functions properly. The flooring isn't torn or damaged and people are being exposed to asbestos. The roof is in good repair, right? So this is just making sure that housing doesn't decline to the point where it's unsafe for people to live there and we lose housing stock that way. Housing agreements and covenants. So we did speak to that earlier, where these are ways that we can help to enforce protection by putting these on title. Another way is regulating and monitoring the short-term rental industry, which is being implemented. It's pretty important in terms of helping us to get a grasp on the state of our housing stock in terms of getting accurate numbers, like how many are being used in this way and how is it actually impacting our housing. It's tough to capture when we try to look at, you know, how many units are actually being used as a home versus it's a summer home and it's vacant most of the year, or it's being used for short-term rentals. It's hard to get a gauge on that. So regulating it and monitoring it will help to get a better understanding about how it affects their housing stock. Consider adopting a policy regarding zoning amendments for short-term rentals. So this just kind of speaks to, you know, council might wish to consider a policy with the goal of breaking tourism dependency on short-term rentals and advancing both housing and tourism goals, right? And so the policy should contemplate how applications to allow short-term rentals in our residential areas should be handled. I.e. will permanent zoning changes be considered, and consultation responses and complaints, how they should be a decision around, say, a zoning amendment. And ideally, the policy should speak to legislative requirements to consider markets. And it's just a recommendation. Hopefully you do what they want, right?
I read that this is over 600 units, that last point,
Yeah.
5.4. Most of them likely strata properties. I think that that's an assumption we're making as a,
We should not, because I have already looked at single family non-strata and it's just under 200.
So we have about 200 houses sitting that are secondary homes.
That could have long-term tenants in them. Or could be summer homes, or could be being used as short-term rentals.
yeah,
So 200 houses out of,
600, is that what you're saying? 200 of them are private.
so 200 out of 2,000. So 10% of our single family homes are, okay.
Okay, it's just the way it was worded. It would look like you were making,
These numbers, I'm not
Okay.
making assumptions. No, I've actually, and I,
number's good. I just,
yeah.
it's. Yeah, it was just the wording of it, because I know, I personally know so many homes that are empty because there's people's second homes. I've worked in them. And they use them throughout the year, so there is a lot of that, that's, you know, and
there always has.
they're always.
Yeah, I think Tia and I will agree on that one.
Yeah.
So is there somewhere in our strategy that we can somehow maybe make that a focus too, that we are somehow trying to engage those folks? So maybe they're not doing long-term, but bylaw 1000 may address this. Where they have to have someone on the property. Now, there will be a clause saying that they could get amendments to that. But so, you know, I understand that it's, you know, some people like to come and go, right? Like,
Well, there,
people, they sled and,
that there is that group of properties before Airbnb even came into play. That they bought their home because it's their summer home and they come and stay in maybe just the summer a few times. But then when, of course,
Yeah.
Airbnb came into play, then while they weren't here, they're like, well, it's sitting, I might as well rent it out, you know, kind of thing.
Yes,
How that all started.
some of them would have just,
Yeah.
I don't mind sharing.
They just sat there.
Yes,
Yeah.
So in terms of physically addressing, say, summer homes, I mean, the province may already be kind of looking into that, trying to open that stuff up, and they've been releasing legislative changes over time. I haven't seen anything specifically for that, but in terms of the district being able to do anything about it, we would have to become a resort municipality. And I don't know how much of a desire there is to do that anymore from council, to get the power to be able to do it. And it has come.
But you're looking at snowbirds too.
yeah.
I mean,
I'm just saying engaging them.
leave their home for all winter long.
With like putting into a coach house, like, well, you can come and stay in your house, but we can also help you out. Is there a way to engage those folks and saying, you could have this as an Airbnb, but wait, there's more, right?
Yeah, and I think that would be part of our communication strategy where we try to put out there, like there's other ways. So some folks might be interested in having a coach house. Just so there's somebody on their property monitoring it when they're not there all year.
Sure.
So they might just keep it vacant, but now there's a coach house, there's a home
Yeah.
for someone, and that gives them some security with their home.
Yeah,
I think that'll become part of our communication strategy, because I don't think like right now we want to be extremely punitive. I think we just really want to get a better.
if that goes out with your tax there, if that goes out with your tax information, your annual tax information, then every property owner in the community receives that document of, this is an education piece.
Yeah.
And we want you to, we're rolling that out so they know, because I think if they're aware, that's the awareness of what we've created here and council adopts. The awareness to each and every resident, whether they be a renter or a homeowner. Because you may, as a renter, you may know a neighbor or whatever, but I feel like that education piece, that is a huge priority. And that we can facilitate homeowners, or there's a department that can facilitate those homeowners that need assistance in understanding the process and, you know.
Seeing the opportunity,
The opportunity,
right?
i.e. the carriage house, they move into the carriage house, they rent out there, or they just the opportunity and understanding it, because a lot of times those seniors are, you know, maybe don't have the capacity to understand what it was we've created. It could benefit.
Yeah, and that's, yeah, I know it was a big deal for the committee was to have a whole comprehensive communication strategy put together. And so that would be further work. So in terms of your recommendations to council, maybe that's one you want to tease out as a specific recommendation, or we can just leave it as implementation plan. We're almost there.
Okay,
We're
Keep
almost
going.
there. Okay. So strategy 6 implementation plan. So first one, review incentives annually to monitor their success, see how successfully the programs that we put in place are functioning. And, you know, maybe consider tweaks if we need to. 2, appoint the housing committee to monitor the progress of implementation of the strategy. 3, update the housing strategy. So we kind of have to, like, we're required to.
Mhm.
5 years, we have to update our housing needs assessment. And then we're required to consider, you know, what our housing targets in our official community planner. So.
Be way easier once this is approved.
Yeah.
Yeah, but at least every 5 years, review the housing strategy against our housing needs assessment and see if we need to change our strategy. Kind of the thought there. Communicate to potential partners, homeowners, and developers. So that would be our communication plan. So in the action, there is one there that says, prepare a communication strategy and implement it. Develop pamphlets, website, etc. This whole program. So, you know, if that's something the committee is really keen on, maybe that's something, you know, that's something you would want to move up. Do we have that in our short-term goals? Curious. Short-term action.
I don't think we
is
did.
it on the back page? Is it on the, oh,
And the short-term actions. So if that's something you want added to the short-term action list, is a community.
I think so,
I think,
oh, yeah.
okay.
low hanging fruit, really.
100%, yeah.
Once council adopts these recommendations. So when council adopts these recommendations, assuming they do, I don't know why they wouldn't.
Mhm.
Could it be embedded right into our OCP?
It can, and I, you know, I've discussed it with Scott because there's, you know, the thought that, you know, we got to look at what kind of work is on staff's plate is to be starting to look at actually, you know, doing a full update of our official community plan. There's already been a lot of work going on this past year where we have the background studies and consultation to update parts of it, right?
Like the transportation plan?
We can do the transportation plan, yeah, housing strategy. There's this whole committee at the museum working on a heritage register and wanting to talk about heritage conservation. So there's all these pieces that would come into play. I think it's certainly something worth talking about more. Like, do we want to go right into the OCP and update our whole housing section? And, you know, get really bold and replace our low density land use designation with medium to really open up land available for some of these projects, but.
Yeah, well, it shows commitment. Shows the direction that the community wants to go and putting it in.
And I don't think we have a choice because we're landlocked.
Right, exactly.
Between ARL and the water and the train tracks, we're.
Yeah.
Unless we start going up.
And then that could supersede the tenure of council too, right? Because it's in the OCP.
Mhm.
I mean, we certainly did do a fair bit of consultation with our survey, get an idea around that, kind of with the thought to what kind of support is out there for increasing our density, basically for doing that. Yeah, I think it's definitely worth talking about. Definitely in terms of as a staff person, what I was thinking, like low hanging fruit, we immediately go in and do something really minor. We tweak our low density zone, our land use designation, because it currently says 1 accessory dwelling unit. Add 2.
Yeah,
So that to that existing low density is a very small change. And tweaking the R1 zone to allow, right, and allow duplexes to have 1 each. Right.
Yeah.
So that's really small and minor that wouldn't be.
But large in scope.
But exactly,
Yes.
yeah, it wouldn't be too huge of a change. Opening up the OCP, I think, like, we'd want to do more consultation to this, I think.
okay.
Do the bigger ones. Okay, oh, and the other action on here is potential partners to initiate collaborative relationships and identify next steps. So that could be different land trusts or, right? I know that's come up a lot. So cooperative work and or land trust thing. Hey, I'm keen on it too.
I'm so big on co-ops. Sorry, I am huge on co-ops. It doesn't cost us anything. Everybody works together and they can age in place
Yeah.
from like 17 to 500 years old.
Beautiful.
And there's pride of ownership.
And they own it,
I'm gonna order a banner for you. Land trust.
right? Co-ops for us.
Yeah.
And so then what I added to this implementation plan, I did mention this to you guys in the last meeting, is that I added these tables that kind of look at specifically how these different strategies can be layered to support a specific goal, like supporting options for seniors. This is page 22. Page 23, support rental housing projects. And the last one, which is kind of our big one, support secondary dwelling units.
Yeah, you got definition of housing agreements there. That's good, yeah. Sorry.
Sorry.
This is excellent. I like this.
This is a very well laid out document.
Yeah.
It flows nicely. It's easy to understand.
I got a couple questions, which we've never approached in our meetings. We don't address the council pushing to get more property out of ARL.
ALR.
Yes, them too. Getting,
Yeah.
we are landlocked, and this is something we have never approached with us. And it's a big thing, but I'm wondering if that should be in the, because we absolutely have to start going up. But at some point, we're gonna have to go out, and I think the district has to start spending some time at looking at. And I'm learning way too much about how hard it is to get property out. But that doesn't mean it's impossible, and at some point, Sick Moose is going to have to do something. We're stuck.
And you know, housing is probably the right approach to go to the ALR, to the commission. So housing is
But they look at-
a crisis, and we've gone to it for, as a district, we've gone to it for campground, but not for housing.
We do have some information around that in terms of, and the district has already received a response. So a bit longer ago, but basically when the Parksville intensive residential development, when that came out of the ALR, so it's coming out in pieces as they take up the next phase. So it's not all out, but as they do that, the ALC was like, okay, we'll support you taking this out because it's for housing. You're required to have a multifamily portion. You're aware where that is, with a big sign on it on Larch. But before we'll do this, the district needs to establish an urban containment boundary. And so what that does is like, this is where commercial and urban development will be. And beyond that, that's all rural resource agriculture. So that's what we did. We did do that. We've got a boundary in there. And they will not consider letting more out until, and they've got a list. One of the big ones is increasing our density. So if we can get this infill thing going, right? Demonstrate that we're using up the land we have.
You just got to,
We're very low density compared to other communities. We start building that up, then we'll start considering it for sure.
have to demonstrate the need.
Yeah,
And like, it's like you say, densified going up, and there's still a lot in Parksville over there to be developed. That's for sale right now, I guess, because in my mind, the developer can only go so far, and then there's a covenant on title that says
he has to develop.
Has to be,
family first, yeah,
affordable housing
before the other
It's
lot.
attainable.
or attainable, but they're at that stage right now where they can't do any more, let's call it commercial, not
Can't do any more single family.
single families until they do the affordable stuff.
Yeah.
And no developer wants to touch that because there's no money in that. And so they're selling it instead. In my opinion,
That's sad.
that's after 10 years. It's been
Yeah,
on the books
It's
for
been
11
a
years.
nightmare.
Yeah. Anyhow, sorry.
And then my only other comment is, are you able, and we'll have to ask council if they want to, is maybe do a Cole's notes on this? So before this starts to pass, that you come in and spend an hour with us? Because I've spent 8 or 9
With
months.
council? Yes.
Betcha.
Okay, so are
And
you,
do a Cole's notes and come in and sit with us and explain this document.
so, okay, so I'm thinking this could be accomplished in a couple ways. So A, when it goes to council, it would include a staff report that would basically be closed, right? But B, there's always an opportunity for staff to present at the COW, the committee of the whole. So there's no decision making there, but it's an opportunity where it's just conversation and questions. So we could look into that.
Honestly, is what I would like, is that the council sits here, we've got you there. We whip through this in a less dense form. And then we say, Sarah, what does that mean? And then you say, this is what it means. I've just spent a year on it. No, it's a huge
Yes.
document and it's very, very important. And if
Just
we're
a
voting on, if
big
we're voting on it, like this is affecting. So I think we need to have you there where we can ask questions. Instead of just sending it out and people are trying to read through it. They're like, okay, right? So and I've been here for every meeting and
It took us an hour to walk through this.
yeah, and we know it.
And we know it.
Yeah.
We created it. But it's good to review it because it's been like, what, 5 weeks since we met, or 6?
Mhm. And I've since I've tightened it up and
Yes, you've really tightened. This is like
No, it's fabulous. Love it.
awesome.
This is a nice document.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I just got just a couple little.
The only one raising.
I know, you may have already talked about these things and they might be more, something deeper into the process, but I keep thinking about affordable housing and affordable heating. Just because, we don't have any affordable real heating in this
I'm sorry,
community,
Jan?
speaking of gas or whatever. What's up?
I couldn't quite hear you.
We just affordable heating, when you're talking about affordable housing, of course, you give somebody an affordable housing, but if they can't afford the heating, and you talked briefly about that in 4.2, but, is there a deeper conversation about affordable heating, like gas coming into Sycamoose, that kind of thing?
Well, right now, council's dealing with Fortis to bring liquefied natural gas in and then distribute it, just sort of like Revelstoke's doing right now.
Yeah, no, because
In order for Revelstoke to do that and make a proper business case, Fortis had to go to the commission and ask to have the rates distributed amongst all the users in BC to offset the higher cost of delivering in Revelstoke. That was approved about a year ago. And so now Fortis has made the second application for Sycamoose. If they brought liquid natural gas and then distributed that throughout town,
right.
could they blend those rates across the province to make that affordable locally? So that application is before the commission right now.
Oh, good. Okay.
exciting.
Yeah, that's
Very
very exciting. The other thing was like the long-term rental thing, terms, like as far as the length of the term. So, I know there's the BC Tenancy Act and,
Yeah.
these people, they get into a long-term rental and then they're kicked out of the, they're,
It's a tough one. I mean, in terms of, I don't know if you're talking about the length of time.
yes, the term, yeah. So when you sign somebody puts you into a long-term, because you hear about it all the time as people are their houses being sold and you're starting all over again.
Yeah.
And the Tenancy Act in the province trumps us
Yeah,
completely. So there's nothing we can do about that.
Yeah.
That is, and I mean, I got caught in that in Vancouver where I went into a 5-year lease. And 11 months later, they sold it out and they just bought my lease. And then I had nowhere to go,
right, yeah.
right? And that's a provincial tenancy.
Mhm.
That's so
Yeah.
far beyond us.
Yeah, so I mean, so that's the idea between trying to support purpose-built rentals and looking at community land trusts. Because
Okay.
what how a community land trust works, and a co-op kind of works similarly, and you'll see them combined sometimes, is that, so the land goes into trust in perpetuity for everyone's land from your taxes. And then you could, at its simplest, people can build their home and they would own their home there. But in order to do that, they would have to sign on to an agreement with the land trust. And what that agreement does is speaks to how much equity you can actually take back out. So it's set up in a way that you would never make crazy amounts of money like some people were recently, right? With the COVID thing and making thousands of dollars, hundreds of $1,000s more than what you would normally. There'd be a cap on that. And it would be set up in a way to offset times of, you know, poor economy and high economy, so that you would always come out, if you were to sell it to move on, you would always come out with some kind of nest egg to help you buy into, say, a new land trust or a co-op or a just a normal tenured type place. But there would be a cap. So you couldn't just keep flipping houses and making money off it. The point would be to make that home stay within an affordable range for everyone.
Right.
You could never sell it. It would never go for market price ever.
Okay.
And co-ops are kind of similar in that
Yeah,
way.
very similar. And Kamloops does a lot of these land trusts.
Yeah.
With apartment buildings. So so you would buy in at $350,000. You die, your kids go to sell it. And that apartment, which may well now be worth $500,000 market value, they're gonna get $375,000 for it.
Mm.
And then the next person can buy in at that, and then they can stay there as long as they can. And so you make a bit and you pay us there's a strata, but it's very small.
Mhm.
And it's so you have a home. The idea is it's like co-op that you're in, like you're living there not to make money. You're living there to have a safe place to live forever or until you can't anymore, right?
So the benefit of having it layering a co-op with a land trust is that, say you move in, you're a young couple, you have a baby, the home you're in isn't big enough.
Mhm.
You have access to any of the homes.
Oh, okay.
Co-op. And it doesn't matter how much you bought into the co-op for.
Hmm.
It has nothing to do with how much money you've paid into it. So that way, you know, people on lower incomes, they can get into the home of the size they need, despite what their budget is.
Right.
Right. So yeah, it's really interesting. We
And
learn
you
a
can go
lot.
down in co-ops too.
Yeah.
If you've got 3 kids, they all move out, then you can actually stay in your community and move into a smaller unit as they come up.
Okay.
So they're pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only other thing that we didn't really talk a lot about was seasonal housing.
Yeah. And I mean, it's a tough one, right? Because of, you know, this is who Sycamore is.
Mhm.
Right? So, I mean, it's like these two were saying with accessory dwelling units, it would be a good way of perhaps adding homes on properties that are seasonal dwellings.
So is that something that this committee is not really, you know, diving
Regulate.
into, or is it
It's
gonna,
addressed as a gap in our housing needs
Yeah.
assessment.
yeah,
You know, the need, that, not just talking about, but the needs assessment. It's addressed as a gap, a housing gap.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think-
That's how.
is it more
Well, it's something we did talk about, and it comes down to being able to have the power to regulate those seasonal residences, so it's a second home. They to be able to tax those properties in a different way to incentivize them to put it to use while they're not there. We would need to become a resort municipality to gain access to that legislative ability, that power to do that. And I don't know how much appetite there is.
yeah,
Owners or businesses are starting to buy units for their staff now.
right.
Like Westview's got,
I mean, and
And Tia can probably speak to this
Well-
because it's your business.
this
Or was.
well, I mean, I came from, before I moved here, lived in Lake Powell on state land. And the concession, which was Del Webb at the time, they, you know, of course, had to house all these people to work there because there was no housing, you know, I mean, so they had to build their own housing there to provide for these people, which was trailer parks. And then also they did, because of the seasonal housing, you know, so there were people that lived there year round that they housed, and then there were people that lived there just seasonal. So they actually built a dormitory style community with a kitchen and everything. A lot of jobs, there were jobs for those people just to maintain that, you know, kind of thing as well.
I did talk to, well, the only one I could get that I was able to speak to, we did put out an invitation. We were doing consultation to the businesses that are seasonal employers to speak with them. So we did speak to Sycamoose houseboats and kind of broach that, like with that, and it's not worth it for them to provide the number that they need.
Well, that's the thing is, yeah,
All winter.
yeah.
So it sounds like.
Well, that's what this did. They were just a seasonal building that they housed them
There needs.
during the
to be
season,
more
but
of a- Maybe a cooperation amongst the companies.
yes, that's probably a,
I think it's up to the private enterprise to sort of fill that gap,
Well,
like Whistler.
but you've got restaurants.
well, and that's, I think, Tia, I mean, we're hitting something there, and maybe it's a business where, because you've got all the seasonal for the houseboat, but now we need people to come and clean
Mhm.
with all our Airbnbs. There's not enough people. I mean, there is people struggling every day to have people to come in and clean their Airbnbs. And there's not, there just is no.
No, I mean, when
So
I
I
was
think
in
we-
the rental business, it was possible to find cleaners, you know, because they don't have a place to live.
Yeah.
Every day it was like, okay, I might have to move out of my house, so I might
Could be.
need to leave, you know, kind of.
That's actually a very viable business to open up here. I mean, just a cleaning company.
Well-
Right now, there's so many independents. Everybody wants to just kind of do their own thing under the table. And that's part of being in a small community and
Just
they
the-
do what they're.
It's not the cleaners, I mean, it's the restaurant people too.
It's everybody. It's staff housing.
Yeah.
Staff housing.
Yeah,
Wait until Bruin Bridge. tender.
Bruin Bridge happened.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
we're gonna,
Oh, we're gonna be dead.
We won't be able to roll this out in time.
no,
So there's gonna be an overlap there where it's gonna get way worse before it gets better.
build it. If somehow we partner and as the district build some kind of housing that is committed to by all the different players. In other words, TA Twin Anchors, you commit to 12 units, as Sycamoose Houseboats 12, whatever the unit is that they need, and they commit to that. And I don't know, that's a whole, that's a co-op.
Well,
Yeah.
isn't it?
no, there's a model out for that.
I'm sure there is.
That we did, it was a case study I brought for you guys.
So you
Yes.
buy a door.
There is a local builder who has a project. It's not like before council yet, right?
Right.
It's gone to the planning and development committee, where they're doing some door sales with employers to provide some units for workers, right? And this particular company is doing it because they can't find housing for their skilled trade workers, right? So they're gonna build like this townhouse complex that, you know, they've gone to these other companies to see, like, to do door sales is what they call it.
Yeah, they're door sales. Yeah.
There's, yeah,
You buy-
it's out in 2 Mile. That's, they were.
Well,
looking
no,
at
right
that project there.
beside the police station here in between the ambulances, there's
Well-
property in there and Bayview's gonna build some units in
Yeah.
there for their own staff.
Well, there's road construction people that come here and look for places for a temporary period. I rented to them several times, you know, through the winter, and I think they have no place.
I think
I have to.
if we open up our accessory dwelling units so that everybody can have them, because right now, well, not anymore, we just adopted a new bylaw. It had to be a basement suite. Well, we live in a floodplain. Like nobody's gonna, you know what I mean? And it's also a huge disincentive because you can hear your tenant, right? So the new bylaw, it can be detached. It can be a coach house, it can be a garden suite. Or it can be detached with like a covered roof over a walkway. Like it's really opened it up. And so then if we add in there, you can have 2. I think that's really gonna help. And it's probably gonna help empty out some of our motels as well. Cause I know some of them, they're just full of people living there.
Yeah,
Those aren't vacationers. So
yeah, it's
everything's flipped. Vacationers are in our houses and our families are in a motel room. So if we can get those units there, it creates a place where people can move to open up other spaces, right? And I think that's the first step. And then once we get our other housing projects going,
Yes,
yeah. I think it's a good start.
maybe.
I think it's a good start.
We're getting there. Thank you.
Yeah.
Your document is fabulous.
Mhm.
Absolutely fabulous. So thank you.
Thank you.
It's been like life draining on you, I know.
That's fun. Yeah, really.
Are we ready then to move on? What are our next steps?
So next steps, guys. Basically, so we've reviewed the document. We've come up with a couple possible revisions. That's mostly, I think, to our short-term actions,
Right.
correct? Add a couple things there, correct.
The one, yeah.
And then recommendations from the housing committee to council. So I put some examples up here.
Okay.
And of course, come up with your own. Just wanted to help you get the juices flowing. First one's really simple, that the 2022 housing strategy be endorsed by council. Another one that council directs staff to follow up on the short-term actions identified on table 4, page 10. We could be more specific if you want. But I would always start with the first one, of course, and then add on some additional recommendations if you wanted. That council support strategy 6 implementation plan and appoint the housing committee to monitor progress. That council directs staff to investigate acquisition of the Holly Avenue Road right of way. There's all kinds of things. And you don't necessarily need to get too nitpicky.
No.
The first one is enough, but if there's a specific thing that you really want to bring to council's attention to get direction on.
So if we do, is it a motion or it's a resolution we bring to
It's
them,
a
right?
recommendation
Recommendation? Okay.
from the committee to council. And
If they're individually, or if say one is encompassing lines 1 and 2, and we want number 3 to happen, does it need to be another a recommendation? Not all tied together, so they don't have to accept it all?
exactly, yeah, they would be numbered.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I'd say we just go with the high level, number 1 there. And then at any point, council can direct staff to say, okay, now that this is adopted, let's chase some low hanging fruit, this one, and this one.
Yeah, and I've tried to format the document in a way where you can just easily identify it, right? So it'd be
The first step would be to have council adopt this,
to endorse it, yeah.
endorse it, adopt it.
And then ideally give
Then
staff
I want-
action to actually.
Yes, I think so. 1 and 2 are key. I think like, because endorsing it does nothing. Let's get moving.
Yep.
Let's get some action items going.
Is it possible to bring this to the next council meeting?
That's actually what I was hoping for, but I think. we've got a request.
We're all free the next 2 weeks. How fast can you get us all in here? Get a room and sign us up in an hour.
Let's talk to Kelly and figure
Okay,
out how
talk to Kelly.
to do it.
To do what? I'm sorry?
I think the whole council should be here and we should have Sarah
Oh,
do Cole's notes and sit down
You know
with
what?
council in this room. We can just ask quick
maybe we
questions.
can steal an hour out of our strategic planning session and Revelstoke can go over the housing.
That's on the 30th.
Well, I had also wondered too about just going to the committee of the whole on the same day as council.
That's March. That
Sorry.
doesn't work. No.
What about the committee of the whole on the 25th? So that's
Is
what,
that financial?
No, it's just for discussion.
yeah. You go to the committee of the whole and then later in the day, take it for endorsement,
And that would take,
same day.
you need to allocate an hour at it on the agenda for this or a half hour or?
Yeah, let's talk to Kelly and figure out how to do it. So instead of taking it for endorsement on the 25th, we might take it to the next February meeting, the first one.
So education first to council and then endorse. You know, I don't think council's gonna balk at this. I mean,
I don't think they will either, but I really feel like they need to be educated
you
on
need to
it.
understand what's in there.
It's a big document and I think we're making some big decisions and I really think everyone should just have some time with Sarah.
It's more about housing. This is an economic driver for our community.
This is Canada right now. Like
Yeah.
housing.
And I think it's
Was just on the news.
Gonna go be ongoing. It's
Oh, yeah.
years, right? It covers for the next 5 years until you do your next needs assessment. Maybe
Yeah, we
it
got
gets adjusted.
4 years left on that, but yeah.
Right, so that's, yeah, so it's key that everybody kind of.
Has it, has
An understanding of what,
And then it's not coming through council. We've got 5 minutes on it. I think that we need Sarah here and that we can ask her some questions and it's just kind of a roundtable.
I think that's an excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So bring this to the next committee of the whole.
Perhaps. I'm putting a note here. I've got a question mark on it.
Yeah, Kelly and
Because I don't know what else is gonna.
and Sarah Carlo.
That's at the end.
Sarah,
well, but
You're all-
Mika and
but they all.
hours.
Caution communities from,
Use her with someone who cares then, I guess.
Yeah.
and ending up with a So you want to do it in
Yeah, yeah.
chunks, right? You got to go gradual.
Okay,
Okay, so
talk to Kelly and we'll figure out which specifically we're gonna do on the 25th. Or if we're gonna fit in something special between then and now, or we'll figure it out, okay? So,
future meetings?
okay. So this would be staff's recommendation. I chatted with Scott about this and Scott has a lot more experience working with this kind of thing. And so quarterly meetings going forward, where we're basically kind of looking at progress, where we're at. Because I think a lot of the work is going to be work that your support staff
Yeah,
is going to be doing and then bringing it and giving you an update as to the status. So these, I looked ahead to see kind of what our next dates would be in accordance with our terms of reference, which is typically the first Thursday of every month we would meet. But there's flexibility built in there. We can move it around if we need to. Yeah.
So
I'm free.
I'm free those days.
Okay. So
the committee,
endorse the strategy and appoint the committee to monitor progress, right? And this would be my suggestion. We meet quarterly and, decide from there. Maybe there's different things that maybe the committee wants more often, but
so in between these dates, like council will adopt a strategic plan. There'll be a rollout to the community for awareness that we do have a strategic plan.
yep. Of course, we'll be doing announcements, right? And then as far as
When's your
I
next?
just want to start working on your communication strategy
Yes,
later.
that's posted right now.
Some of it, it's like, well, maybe we need to actually enable some of this first or communicating, but an initial step would be, yeah, just communicating the fact that we have a strategy. We're proud of it. Look at it, guys.
Mhm.
The district is thinking about putting out a newsletter fairly soon, but we'll miss that window, I guess, eh?
Put a question mark your newsletter.
Yeah, I think we have to have our submissions.
I
in
think it
by-
needs to be adopted before we hit the newsletter.
Yeah, that's what I mean. We'll probably miss that window,
25th probably, hey? Okay.
but maybe we could do a mail out with the water bills. A one page,
That's a good one.
Good one.
That's a really good one.
we have a one page awareness that we now have a new strategic housing plan.
Okay, with the water bills. Okay,
Every owner gets that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's
And I like that.
just a one pager, double sided one pager.
one page, two sides. Okay. We can do that. Right, so we already kind of talked about January 25th. What else?
So I read up, so
If we're ready to move along, I can, okay. So. Oh,
innovation grant,
sorry, it's the innovation fund. Yeah.
right?
So this was something that CMHC shared with us through engagement, is that this innovation fund was coming. Round 3 and 4 are now open. So we did reach out to CMHC to see if this was a grant that we could make use of for our infill accessory dwelling unit project, to get some grant funding, to get some money, to get plans. And it didn't seem like it was going to be a good fit, but there is another one coming out soon that hasn't been announced, called the Housing Accelerator Fund. And they also shared with us that we are not the only community looking at these plans, and that Creston has adopted a policy around it, hasn't implemented it yet, and Nelson has implemented
Around what kind of policy? I'm sorry.
for so buying the plans,
Oh, right, have available.
construction plans,
That's-
re-reviewing and stamping them ready for construction. So there's a whole list of other places.
So Kelowna's already done that and Nelson's doing it, and who else?
So Nelson's doing it, Crescent has adopted a policy, and then there's a bunch of others that are considering it. So Kimberly, Ucluelet, Castlegar, Port Alberni, Grand Forks, White Rock, and the Soyuz.
So we can plagiarize from them instead of reinventing the wheel.
Well, you can't really, you have to buy the plans.
Well, not the actual plans, but the process.
Yeah, sure. we can certainly look at them for examples.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? Round 3, Rapid Housing Initiative. What is that then? If it doesn't fit because is it the one that closes in March?
I think so.
Yeah.
What that is, and I mean, I sort of saw maybe some opportunities, but I don't think we're not close. We're not there.
We're not close enough. Okay.
Yeah. And so what that is it's support for communities that are investigating rapid housing. So something that can go up quickly, that's scalable. So the preparation of plans and then the implementation of a first phase.
That's
Test it out and see if it's going to work.
to get people off the street.
Will it work as designed? So it's an innovative thing. And I did see, so Hay City was one of them. There's another one as well. There's 2 architectural firms out of Vancouver that work on this, that have these, they've already got some plans for buildings that are scalable. So you can do, they'll fit on a single family park. You would have, it's almost like a triplex kind of, but it's constructed in a way to be respectful to the street and neighboring properties and ensure that people who live there have open space. They're kind of neat. I should have maybe thrown an image in here. So you can
Like what you've shown us before, it looks like it's new. Is it new? Oh.
something else. But their designs, you can also add more. And so then it'll. look more
Oh,
like
Lego.
Family building, right? Yeah, kind of thing. And this one company is really into micro ops. So each building would be a micro co-op. Or if you did multiple buildings, it would be a co-op. And having, what was the other concept they had there? Where you could kind of repurpose space. Units could be bigger or smaller. So you lay out the floors and hallways in such a way that if a family needed the whole floor, they could take the whole floor, but there's also space for 2 units on that floor. It was interesting. It was interesting. They had all these factors. So something like that would work, but like, we're not there.
Yeah, we're not ready.
Yeah. It's pretty cool though. But other communities can trial it out first.
Yeah, all right. Okay, any further discussion or questions or comments? No? Okay, anybody? All right, well, Sarah, thank you so much because you have carried.
I forgot to get a recommendation from you guys.
Oh,
Do you want to do a recommendation to council?
yes,
Yes.
1 and 2. Or that's let's comment.
Motion.
Let's have a.
Okay. Oh, I thought that was what you were, okay.
Well, you kind of had
Can
it
you put 1 and 2 back? Can you put that?
back up on the screen.
please?
Yeah, so that the District of Sycamore's Housing Committee recommend that the 2022 Housing Strategy Plan be endorsed by council.
Yeah, I like the word, putting the plan in there. I like that, yeah.
Does that make sense, Sarah?
So you were adding the word plan after strategy?
Yeah,
It is a plan, eh?
It's a strategy.
It's a strategic plan. Isn't it? It's strategic.
Just gonna be a cement.
I don't.
Says housing.
Housing strategy. I don't care.
It's
I'm-
not cement.
Whatever. I couldn't resist.
do you add? And once endorsed that council directs staff to follow up on short? Or do we do that as a separate one? Or are you just gonna do the first one?
Yeah, we just want them to endorse it.
Just get it in?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Okay, so you need to call,
Anybody? Oh,
So how do you have it?
we make a motion.
What do you have?
Somebody want to make a motion?
I can.
Okay, and then Sarah, would you read that motion out again? And we'll,
okay.
Well, Tia's gonna make one.
Okay,
it's okay.
so
That,
the housing committee would like to make a motion that the 2022 housing strategy be endorsed by council.
okay, and any,
Somebody have to second that?
somebody second it?
First and second,
Okay. First and second, do we do a discussion now? No, we have,
No, you're supposed to ask for discussion.
yes, for discussion.
okay, any discussion then? We've already had that.
Yeah.
Any further discussion? No? Okay. Yes?
Oh, all in favor. I thought we were
I
there.
was gonna say. All in favor, you're ahead of us. All in favor.
How many months did that take, Sarah? When did we start?
9 months.
April.
Wow.
We did one meeting a month.
Yeah.
For the most part. I think we had 2 meetings 1 month
2 in June, I think.
and we workshopped our way through it all and then, yeah.
Sorry, I missed it all.
It is all on YouTube. Yeah.
You're gonna catch up. Tia. Don't worry about it.
So I just want to end then saying, Sarah, thank you so much for all of your input and research and your presentations to us. They were amazing and I just kudos to you. Thank you. And to your department and whoever helped you.
Steffi and Scott.
And we'll be one of
Okay.
those communities that other people look at us and say, well, look what they're doing. Let's follow what
Let's
they're doing.
plagiarize.
So on that note, recommendation that the Housing Committee meeting for January the 12th, 2023 be adjourned, the time being 2:44 PM. Okay.
The next